there's a lot of fear with taking leave. And I think the financial piece is a part of that. But if we can make informed choices, right? We're like, okay, let's actually crunch the numbers. What do I have to cover business-wise? What are the expenses I need to cover family-wise? What does it look like to be able to save that? Are there things that I can put on pause if I'm in private practice? When I went on maternity leave, I put my EHR on a lower tier because I didn't need all of the things when I was on leave, but I still wanted to have it all maintained. It was, ready there, dropped it down 2 tiers and saved money that way, right?
Welcome to the Colleague Down the Hall podcast. This episode is sponsored by the Collab Oasis Clinical Consultation Groups. Hi, I'm Janine Wolf, and I'm your colleague down the hall. I have a passion for helping fellow therapists get the clinical and collegial support we all need to do this work. And wow, it just keeps getting harder every day. I'm the founder and facilitator of the Collab Oasis Clinical Consultation Groups. I have been a social worker for almost 30 years, and I own a successful solo online private practice. More of us than ever are practicing in solo or online practices, and we all need colleagues to process cases with, commiserate with on those really hard days, and also to celebrate our successes with. In this podcast, I'll bring you insights about trends and changes in our field and sit down with amazing therapists who are doing amazing work. We'll discuss fictionalized cases, ways to practice sustainably, and of course, there will be plenty of laughing. I love laughing with friends. I'm so glad to have you as one of my colleagues down the hall. Hello, everyone. You are listening to another episode of the Colleague Down the Hall podcast. I'm your host, Janine Wolf, and I'm joined today by Ashley Comegys. Said that right, I think.
Yes, you did.
Ashley, oh, great. Ashley is a licensed clinical social worker with a multi-state online therapy practice that helps women with anxiety navigate life transitions. And she specializes with working with women in the perinatal period as well as military spouses. Yay, you. I work with a lot of military spouses. I lived in Hampton Roads, so we have like the most number of bases, I think, in the world here. And we need lots of people to do that. And actually, I have an upcoming episode where I'm going to be talking to a psychologist who's very involved in women in aviation. And she's going to be talking about some of the things for people who are active duty about diagnosing and medication and all that stuff so that we're not creating more harm than good.
Yep.
So I'm looking forward to that episode too. And I think both of us can probably benefit from that because that's a topic that there's not a lot of discussion about. Yeah.
For sure.
But today we're going to talk about taking maternity leave while working in private practice. And this is another topic I'm thrilled to be discussing. It's been on my list for quite a while. And so I'm happy for us to just jump in. So welcome, Ashley.
Yeah. Thanks so much. And I haven't actually had a chance to tell you, but we are actually going to be moving to the Hampton Roads area this summer due to our relocation with military. So yes, that is right in the wheelhouse. There's a ton of military there.
Okay. Yes. So we're going to have to talk about that off the recording.
Yes.
Because I need details. I need more details.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Great. Okay. So let's start with why this is a topic of interest to you for the listeners to know.
So it's interesting because, there's so many different directions we could go with this, right? Like, I think maternity leave in general, it's not something in our United States society that is handled, I think, the best way, compared to a lot of other countries. And so I think the approach or mindset that so many women and men have about taking maternity or parental leave is based on, well, this is the gift that is given to me, right? Whatever that may look like, if it's even an option, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so when we're coming into private practice, I don't think a lot of us really know, like, how does this work with maternity leave? I hear a lot of times, like, am I allowed to take maternity leave in private practice? And that goes into this whole like permission asking thing that I think so many of us experience, but people don't realize, like, oh, I can do that in private practice. I can take a maternity leave. And what does that look like? How do I do that? And so I think it's really important topic because I'm a big advocate for women to be business owners, to kind of pave their own path. And I think private practice for moms is a really great kind of what's the word I'm looking for? It kind of goes hand in hand with the flexibility that you need for childcare and just
Mm.
the day-to-day upheaval that
Right.
comes with kids. And so I think, knowing that, okay, if you're going to be going down the road of having children and you're interested in private practice, it doesn't have to be this, well, I'm just going to wait to get out of agency work to do private practice after I have my kids. It
Mm-hmm.
can be at the same time. And there are
Mm-hmm.
ways to do it to allow you to have a maternity leave that actually works for you.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's such a great point because my experience with private practice, after you get your feet wet, you kind of see things from a different perspective because a lot of therapists think that private practice is really rigid. Like you have to see clients, you
Yeah.
can't ever cancel, you have to do this, you have to do that. And it's actually one of the more not financially for maternity leave as
Right.
opposed to having paid maternity leave, but it's more flexible than most people allow until they
Yeah.
really settle in. Like over the course of my career, I've changed my schedule so many times. I've
Yeah.
shifted who I'm working with. And I remember I used to get all freaked out about like, oh my gosh, I can't do evenings anymore. And I would lose sleep the
Yeah.
night before about telling clients, and they'd be like, okay, cool, let's look at a different time. And so
Yes.
we have that flexibility.
Yes. Yeah. And I think that's such a good point because I think a lot of times, whether it is because we're going on maternity leave or because life just needs us to have a different schedule, I think we worry more than our clients do about
Yes.
like being able to be seen. I've now taken 3 maternity leaves in private practice and they've each looked a little bit different. And I've never had somebody say, I can't believe you're leaving, right? Like, or I can't
Right.
believe, I'm not going to get to work with you. It's usually they're really excited for you,
Hmm.
or, it may be, okay, so like, how will this work when you're on leave? And that's where we have discussions about that.
Yeah.
What does coverage look like? What is your availability? When do you anticipate returning? And there's a whole other part of this of like, how do we disclose to clients, especially if they have had their own experience with perinatal loss or,
Yes.
struggling to conceive. But that piece in general of just don't hold yourself back from saying,
Yeah.
okay, I'm going to do this simply because, well, what's going to happen with my clients? We're
Hmm.
going to figure that piece out.
Hmm.
We're going to figure that piece out, and your clients are too. But that doesn't have to be the thing to stop you from doing what is going to really be best for you and your family.
Right. And what my experience, I had 3 maternity leaves while working at a pediatric hospice. And, I think it's important that we have sensitivity about the way our own lives impact those that we're working with. But
Yeah.
I mean, without a doubt, every single one of them was thrilled. I waited till I was showing. I was in person at that time, which is actually an advantage. If you're virtual, it's a little bit harder because
Sure.
they don't
Yeah.
see your body changing. But they were so excited and happy for me. And even with vacations, I find that my clients are like, "Oh, I'm so glad you're having some time off."
Yeah.
And so we have to put it in our heads that not only do we deserve that time for
Yep.
ourselves and need that time, but that we care about our clients and they typically care about us as well. And they want to support
Yes.
us.
Well, and one of the things I've heard a lot of question about too is like, well, is my caseload going to be there when I come back,
Right.
right?
That's scary. Yep.
Like are people going to want to work with me? And in the 3 different maternity leaves that I've taken, I've had clients come back consistently. The first one was a bit longer, and I wasn't even sure if I was going to be coming back because we were moving. And I took a long leave and actually left a group at that time to then start my own practice. But with the other 2, with my first one, I think every client came back. And
Yeah.
with my most recent one, it actually worked in my favor because I had told people going into maternity leave. And then when I had reached out, when I was preparing to come back, I had to let them know, like, my schedule is not going to look the same. I'm not going to have as much availability. I'm just having to cut back because I just have a lot higher family needs right now. Right. And
Hmm.
I was a little bit worried because historically my clients have just like continue to work with me. And it's interesting because I had found coverage for all of my leaves. The middle leave, nobody wanted to be seen. They had the emergency numbers and all of that.
Right.
But this second, this most recent maternity leave, about half of my clients were like, no, I think I do want to be seen. I do want to come back to you, but
Mm-hmm.
I want to be seen. And of let's say about 30 clients, about half of them said either I moved, I, do want to just continue with the other person, or I want to just take a break. I'll reach out if need be. And then the other half were like, yes, I'm ready to come back. So it really worked for me because I didn't have space for all of these clients.
Yeah.
But that if you are afraid to take this leave because like what's going to happen to my caseload, I think you'll be pleasantly surprised what is
Mm-hmm.
waiting for you on the other side.
Right, right. Yeah, and so I want to take a little detour here because
Yeah.
one of the things you're talking about is the decisions that women face that we're not necessarily prepared for and the fear that we have around that. So
Yeah.
I remember went through graduate school, had a job I loved, all of a sudden I have this baby and I have this huge conflict and no one had ever prepared me for the fact that I might get to that point someday and it was just presumed that
Sure.
I was going to be home at least whatever the child care, the care for the child was going to look like, it was on me. I did make a point when my daughters were, getting in their teens and stuff to just say, hey, when you're picking a career, this is just something that you want to think about because, and it might be that you marry someone who wants to take care of the child and you're not the primary caretaker. But there's so many different fears. And then I went through a period of time where I quit working completely. And so then the
Mhm.
fear of re-entering the workplace. So that's what you're
Yes.
doing after maternity leave, but this is on a bigger scale,
Yeah.
and it's like, oh my gosh, like, do I even remember how to do this work? Am I able to do this?
Yeah.
Is mom brain going to keep me from forming a complete sentence with my
Oh, for
clients?
sure. For sure.
Yeah. And I
Well, and
think we don't normalize and affirm that enough, that these things that not just as therapists that we face, but that women face as well. And there's a lot of difficult choices. But then when you own your own business and you're
yes.
not having paid leave, then that brings in all other elements as well.
No, for sure. For sure. In all of my pregnancies, I've experienced postpartum anxiety. And one of the things I've been so grateful for being a, private practice owner is having the flexibility to say, nope, I'm not ready to come back yet if that's the case. And one of the things this most recent maternity leave that I was very cognizant of was like, okay, where am I in, the typical maternity leave? Okay, I'm at 6 weeks postpartum. This is when a lot of women are being kind of forced to go back to work. They may not even been paid for those 6 weeks. Now they're
Yeah.
being told you have to return or you don't have a job, right?
Right.
And I could not comprehend how I would have gone back to work for somebody at that point. My baby
Mm-hmm.
was not sleeping, therefore I wasn't sleeping. I barely understood what was happening with my body at that point, right? And so to be forced to return to something at that time, I can't imagine, and my heart breaks for women who are kind of forced into that. And so that's where I've been so grateful with being in private practice to be able to say, okay, I've given my clients a tentative return date, but if that doesn't work for me, it
Yes.
is okay to say, no, I'm not coming back then. I will be in touch with you when I am planning to do that.
Mm-hmm.
We hope for the best in delivery, right? Like nobody
Sure.
wants there to be problems, but you don't know, right? And even from
Mm-hmm.
first child to third child, it can be totally different experience. You may not have struggled in postpartum and this time you are. You
Yes.
may have had an uncomplicated pregnancy and you end up with a baby in the NICU after delivery, right? Like we don't know all of how this is going to go. And so that is one of the things when I'm, helping other women figure out maternity leave is give yourself some space so that you're
Yeah.
not having like this hard and fast return date that you're telling yourself and therefore your clients, I will be back on December 3rd, right? Because we don't know. And
Right.
so that's where I am very grateful for the container that is private practice to
Mm-hmm.
be able to say like, yes, I'm ready to come back, or no, I'm not.
Mm-hmm.
And to also be cognizant too, kind of like to your point of like, is it mom brain? Is it just exhaustion? Right. That like
Yeah.
there is another component. Like we in our work don't just go and sit in front of a screen crunching numbers that we're not having to interact with people, right? Like we
Right.
have to be on top of our game.
Yeah.
And, if we recognize like, whew, I'm not quite there yet, can we give ourselves some breathing room to say, I need a couple more weeks or months, whatever that
Mm-hmm.
timeline might
Mm-hmm.
be.
Yeah. And the other thing that needs to be normalized a lot more is there's a lot of books and resources out there to support women having their first baby. But you truly don't know what that experience is going to be like until you go through it. Even
No.
if you've had family members, and each of my three babies was very different. They were very different as babies and their needs and sleep and all that kind of stuff. And you just can't be prepared, and your body is different
Right.
each time. But the very first time, it's just, I don't know anyone that didn't say, wow, that was way more than I thought. You just can't
Yes.
comprehend that level of sleep deprivation, really, most of us.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think even too, like, so I just had my third, she'll be 7 months in 2 days. So, it has been a major adjustment of going from 2 to 3 just as a family, right? And so, not just like you're adding this new being into your life that you're like, I'm trying to figure you out, you're trying to figure me out. But then also, like, we look at the larger system, the family system is trying to adjust and figure itself out too, which can weigh on us. And, you know, a lot of times women do tend to be the ones who either stay home or a lot of the childcare does fall to. And so even if we are working or in private practice, there's still stuff, required of us. If you are breastfeeding, you are going to have to pump or, feed in between sessions. You may be responsible to stay home with a kid if they're sick because you have a little bit more flexibility, right? So it's a great thing that we have that with our maternity leave, but to also recognize that there can be like easily more put on us simply because, well, we are in the role of mother or we are in the role of business owner and we have this flexibility. So just kind of being real with yourself and also your partner of, hey, like where might some other things need to shift so that I'm not even more tipped into like the motherhood exhaustion than I
Right.
already am.
Right, absolutely. Yeah. And that's also a conversation that I don't know many people think about having before the baby arrives. Let's sit down with my partner and talk about what this is going to look like because something's going to
Right.
have to change and let's plan ahead for what that's going to be.
Right. And, I'm all about like having those kinds of conversations before baby arrives,
Yeah.
especially where, yes, we do have flexibility with our work, right? Which is great. And I love that as a mom that like, okay, if there was something going on at the school for kindergarten graduation, I could go to that, right? Because I could say, no, I'm not seeing clients today. But there is the flip side of that. If I'm not seeing clients, then I'm not making money, right? So being able to have conversations with your partner, if you have one, to say, okay, so yeah, I'm willing to shift, but like every week I can't be the one to take off. So where do you have some room to support me in that? Are you able to take off or be the the main caregiver for a period of time so I can see clients if it comes to it, a place
Mm.
where, all of my work is kind of being sacrificed?
Yeah, right. Okay. All right. So let's get a little into the logistics of that. I actually, early on in my membership, I had a member going out on maternity leave, and we worked pretty closely together, sort of outlining all the different
Yeah.
things. And so I would love to hear like how you structure that and your recommendations.
Yeah. So I actually have a mini $9 course called Maternity Leave Blueprint. And so it's something that's very simple to really help people think through not just maternity leave, but pregnancy with private practice, right? Because how we experience each trimester is like can impact our work, right? Like that first trimester is so rough. And so
Yeah.
having that game plan of like, what do you do when you are not feeling well? And you're like, I can barely keep myself upright and I'm supposed to see clients. So kind of how are you communicating with clients that way? And then through all the trimesters. So one of the things I think first in thinking about private or one of the things first in thinking about maternity leave is the big question is like, how do I start talking to clients about this, right? Like, how do I
Yes.
start disclosing and preparing them? And I always tell clients, back up, I always tell, expectant mom practitioners that it's when you feel like you're ready, right?
Yeah.
That you may not feel comfortable telling people in general till you're in your third trimester. You may feel comfortable telling them as soon as you take a pregnancy test, right? It really is going to vary pregnancy to pregnancy, mother to mother. And so to not feel this pressure, like, well, I'm now 14 weeks, I'm in that second trimester, I need to tell them. When you feel ready to disclose that is what's most important. And so just like when we see a client for the first time, we think about like that first session, we're already planning for termination, right? That,
Right.
when we first disclose to clients that we are pregnant, we're already starting to plan for maternity leave, even if it is early on. And so it's just kind of helping them to know like, hey, there is going to come a time when there's going to be a pause. And you don't have to know what that's going to look like when you're disclosing your pregnancy to them. Or, I even want to also recognize that it may not be a pregnancy. It may be an adoption. It may
Mhm.
be that you are having baby via surrogacy, right? That you are coming into parenthood and you can still take this maternity leave. And so just letting them know this is coming. And as I figure out more along the lines of what that's going to look like, we will have further discussions about that. So I think first giving yourself permission to not have it all figured out,
Mhm.
that I think is kind of the really important first step in kind of thinking
Right.
that.
Good. Yes, that's I was talking to my mom last night and I said, I remember when the kids were younger and they do something, I would learn that I couldn't give a consequence on the spot because nothing good came of that. So I'd be like, you're consequence and I'm going to tell you what it is later. So I'm
Yes.
going to have maternity leave, but I'll tell you about it once I figure it out.
Yes, because and the thing is a lot of times clients will have questions. Oh, so when are when are you going to go out? What's going to have to happen? And you may say I have, I'm still figuring it out or maybe you do have a plan. But like I said before, pregnancy and postpartum is so fluid in many ways and there's ups and downs and so much we can plan for but also cannot plan for. And so to just prepare yourself and your clients like to have a bit of flexibility.
Mhm.
So thinking then like, okay, how do we figure out what it is that we want? We do have to anticipate what are our expenses going to be with maternity leave. And that is a big piece, right? That there
Mhm.
are financial benefits to maybe working for an organization that does cover maternity leave. If you're working in private practice, you don't necessarily have that unless you are planning and saving, or there are some states that do offer like a maternity leave benefit, even for self-employed. I think Connecticut is one of them. And
Mhm.
so being able to kind of calculate like what are my expenses business wise and family wise
Mhm.
to kind of be saving either before I get pregnant or through pregnancy, or even to say like what family resources, what money that we just have as a couple or as an individual do I have that I can pull in to help cover this stuff if I'm not making money during this time. I have a calculator that really helps to figure out like, okay, if you want to take X number of weeks of maternity leave and you have these family expenses and you have these business expenses, like what do you need to be saving per week, or
Mhm.
per month to plan for taking X number of months or weeks off. And really, that's just to help you be informed, right? Because
Mhm.
if you're feeling like I can only take 6 weeks, I don't think I can do less than that or take more than that, but the financial calculator says actually you can, then let's
Mhm.
do that, right? Let's get as much time in that postpartum period for you to just be in motherhood and not feeling like I have to be pulled into this other part of myself and pouring into other people, in private practice.
Right. And something that goes along with that, that I've been talking about kind of extensively as I've navigated several deaths in my family over the last year and a half, is that we in private practice need to be creating a fund like that anyway, because you
Yeah.
might have an unexpected pregnancy, or you might have other things that happen, or you have a
Yep.
week where everyone cancels, or you
Yeah.
have clients that get discharged unexpectedly, and having that money to be able to pay yourself from. So
Yeah.
that's such an important thing. So I'm glad you're talking about how that can be done with maternity leave, because that's super important. But I
Yeah.
just feel like, for those of us in private practice, we really need to understand we will alleviate so much stress if we know
Yes.
that we can maintain income when life throws life at us, when it's unexpected.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, that's important in general, right? Like even if you go back to work after maternity leave, right? Kids get sick, daycare's closed, right? So like how are you going to, cover that as well? And so yeah, it's a really important thing, but I think it's one of those things, you were talking about like there's a lot of fear with taking
Mhm.
leave, and I think the financial piece is a part of that. But if we can make informed choices, right? We're like, okay, let's actually crunch the numbers. What do I have to cover business wise? What are the expenses I need to cover family wise? What does it look like to be able to save that? Are there things that I can put on pause if I'm in private practice? When I went on maternity leave, I put my EHR on a lower tier because I didn't need all of the things when I was on leave, but I still
Right.
wanted to have it all maintained. It was,
Hmm.
ready there, dropped it down 2 tiers and saved money that way. Right. So there are things to say, yeah, I can still do this and not feel I'm beholden to going back what before I really feel ready, but being able to make a decision that's informed. I
Yeah,
think information is power. I know it's
absolutely.
cliche, but it really is.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So you've planned for the maternity leave.
Mhm.
You're getting closer. What are the next steps for like notifying clients? What's going
Yeah.
to happen to clients? That kind of stuff.
So, one of the things I think is important is for you to consider what do you want access wise during maternity leave? Like I know some clinicians say, I am fine if a client wants to email me, or I can do a phone session. For me, that was like not even a realm of possibility. And so I do encourage if you feel like you can to really take time to not have to be in that therapist hat.
Yeah.
So, if that's the case, if you're not going to have contact with clients, we want to have some connection to those that might help provide coverage. And that can look like a couple different things. I've had some
Hmm.
therapists who they will, cover in the sense of, hey, if a client is feeling like they need to be seen and I'm not back from maternity leave, can they reach out to you? Sure, absolutely. Or I've had clients that told me as we were preparing for maternity leave, I kind of asked them, do you feel like you need to be seen? Or do you feel like you want just kind of a list of providers? And there were some that were like, no, I really feel like I need to be seen. And so I gave them a list of providers that I had connected with that were willing to cover and I thought would be a good fit for them. And so they made a decision. Yep, I do want to see Courtney. So they, set up a time to have an initial appointment with Courtney. And then I did a consultation with these other therapists to say, let me have a really easy, warm handoff. Because for a lot of clients that did want to continue to be seen, there is this, oh, I don't want to have to start over. Right.
Right. Yeah,
And so I
exactly.
really wanted to help make sure that like they were going to get the best care they needed and not feel like, this is, a burden, but like, okay, this is going to still be taking care of myself while Ashley is on leave. So, having a list of providers, if you're licensed in multiple states, you may have to have a list for, one state and a list for another, but that these are people and resources, such as emergency numbers that are available for clients. And I provide that just in like a whole, like a PDF document that I just email to all of them. And we talk about it as well too. So
Mhm.
having, a plan for who's going to be available if clients need to reach out, communicating that to clients, and then helping to make that transition of kind of that handoff if a client is going to be seen. Clients were so appreciative of that
Yes.
with this leave, because I was really proud of so many of them that they were like, no, I really do want to be seen while you're on leave, because I felt like, okay, you guys see the benefit to this, right? You know
Right.
the importance of this for yourself. And so I know a lot of times clients won't do that because they're like, I just don't want to see somebody else, right? So for
Right.
them to do that, I'm like, all right, good for you. So I want to help make this as easy as a transition. So, it wasn't that I had to do hours and hours of consultation. I had, like I said, probably about half of my clients saw somebody else, and it was not that difficult to just kind of do a 1 day, a couple hour consultation to go over the cases and then to help make that warm handoff for when I'm on leave.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really important. And I think, and it comes, we have to think about some of the courage that's involved in this, because I know when I've referred clients for maybe adjunct therapy or something like that, I always want to give them the peace of mind that if for some reason you find working with that person is a better fit and you want
Yes.
to continue with them,
Yes.
I will understand and that is okay. And giving them that permission ahead of time, which is
Yep.
scary again, because you're like,
It
what if they
is.
all stay with the new
Yes.
person? But I think it's a kindness to our clients, and it shows that we care about them,
Yep.
but it also doesn't leave them at home wringing their hands thinking like, what am I going to do? I really love this new person. We've hit it off. It's
Yes.
been great, but now I'm going to be hurting Janine's feelings.
Yes. Yeah. And I have that exact same conversation with them. I tell them, like, look, if you want to be seen while I'm on leave, great. If you don't want to be seen, that is okay. And if you do want to be seen, whether it is with the therapist that I help to hand you off to, or if it is with somebody else that you reach out to, if you want to continue to see them when I come back, that is okay. Like,
Hmm.
I'm not going to be hurt by that. Like, it is absolutely okay. And I will do whatever I can to help make that transition smooth if more is needed from me. And I did have a couple clients that did continue to see the therapist that I had referred them to for while I was on leave. One of them worked better for her financially, another just the schedule lined up better, and that's okay. Like, it
Hmm.
was actually a good thing because I didn't have any more room in my schedule. But
Yeah.
again, like you said, I feel like it's a big step for them to say, I'm going to go see somebody else in general. And so I want to support that if they're not
Hmm.
wanting to come back to me. And it's okay. It's absolutely
Hmm.
okay.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And when I was working with a colleague that was going on maternity leave, one of the things she was like, I'm going to be in touch with my clients. I'm going to let them know, if I have the baby early. And I was like, no, 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 no.
Yeah.
You're on the way to the delivery room. You're not canceling your appointments. And having had a baby that came early, I was like, that's not a good
Yes.
idea. So we signed a BAA for me to be in her admin system. And I was like,
Yeah.
you have to make one call or text or email, and I gotcha. I'm going to go through your
Yeah.
calendar. And then during maternity leave, if you find you need more time, if you sometimes when you reconnect with the client, you send that email or whatever, then they kind of feel like, oh, I have access again. So having that person that can say, oh,
Yeah.
it's going to be extended.
Yeah. Yeah. And for me, I had told my clients, so I went out on maternity leave like October 1st, I think it was this time. And so I had told them, after October or like the end of September, starting October 1st, I'm not going to be available. I wasn't having the baby till the end of the month, but I had some admin stuff I needed to wrap up. My body was just done. I just didn't have the capacity anymore. And I had pushed it the last maternity leave to see clients up to like 2 weeks before delivery. And I just mentally and physically I was done. So I knew this time, like, nope, I'm going to give myself a little bit more time. And so I told them, after October 1st, if you are in need of anything, you have the list, you have the providers that you've been referred to, and that I would reach out to them. I gave them a ballpark. I said, I anticipated returning to see clients like mid-February, and that I would be
Hmm.
reaching out sometime in January to just kind of let them know, here's what my schedule will be. And, are they interested in coming back? And I didn't have anybody push that boundary. Like, I didn't have anybody that was like emailing me or contacting me during maternity leave. They were all
That's
very, very
great.
respectful of that. And that when I did come, was preparing to come back, it wasn't, hey, I'm all of a sudden available, but it was, hey, here's what it's going to look like. I'm going to be coming back on these days. I'm going to have these times available. I don't have as much availability. So if you are not planning to return, let me know. But this is also kind of like first come, first serve basis that if you are interested, you need to let me know soon and fast so I can get you in a time slot. And, I had to kind of assess for myself when I was going to kind of send that email of, hey, I'm available, because I dealt with just a lot of struggle with my baby feeding this go around. It was very stressful, a lot of anxiety around that, and a lot of exhaustion. And I was
Yeah.
not sleeping well. And so I had thought earlier in January, this would probably be a good time to email, but I was like, I couldn't open up that door. I
Yeah.
wasn't ready for that re-engagement yet. So I
Hmm.
did wait until a little bit later in January because I just mentally wasn't in that space to have to re-engage with clients, even via
Yeah.
email. Right.
Yeah.
And so to then let them know this is what it's going to look like and I will see you on these dates, it
Hmm.
still gave me a little bit of space, but I also was checking in with myself and I knew, okay, I'm in a little bit better place that I feel like I can engage even via email.
Yeah.
And they know I'm still not fully back until this time, but at
Right.
least we can talk schedule at this point.
Yeah. So the message that is really important here is provide lots of flexibility and openness for
Yeah.
yourself because life
Yes.
doesn't always go the way we plan. Often it doesn't. And
Yeah.
so that you can decrease your own anxiety about, of course, we're going to worry about our clients when we're away. So you can decrease the anxiety that there's an expectation that you can't meet and now you're letting them down. But
Yes.
like, this is the range that I'm looking at. And
Yes.
this is how you'll know when I'm ready to come back and those types of things.
Exactly. Yeah. If we can, from the get go lay out that this is going to be fluid and flexible, to our clients that's what they can kind of expect. Again, I have yet to have anybody be like, well, this just doesn't work for me. I can't believe you're doing that. Right. Like,
Yeah,
again, it's
right.
very supportive. And if it doesn't work for them, it's okay. And they move on to somebody else.
Right.
Right. I did have a couple people say, you are coming back though, right? Because they'd had previous therapists who had gone on maternity leave and just didn't come back, which I get
Right.
that, right? As a
Sure.
client, they're like, that's hard. And so,
Hmm.
I was honest with them. I said, I have every intention of coming back, right?
Right.
Things do happen though, right? If there
Hmm.
was an emergency or a crisis that but I would communicate that, hey, either my leave has been pushed out an additional 6 months, or at this point I don't know when I'm going to return. But I was just honest that that's my intention, but we will have to see how
Hmm.
everything plays out. And so just recognizing that it is okay if you don't have answers to give clients. If you're saying, I
Hmm.
anticipate coming back in this month, I may reach out to you by this point, but I will definitely reach out to you regardless, right? Just
Right.
having some flexibility so that way they know this is when I may expect to hear from you. And I actually did have several clients, like when I finally reached out in January, they're like, I was just wondering, I thought I might hear from you about this time.
Hmm.
So it helped them to know, like, oh, yeah, all right, January, end of the month, I'm going to start looking for that email from Ashley. And when
Right.
I was able to do that, they were waiting for it.
Yeah, yeah. And I am a huge fan of scripts. So for when you are
Yes.
initially telling your clients and then you're giving them the information about maternity leave, writing it out, practicing it in front of the
Yes.
mirror, that will decrease your
Yes.
anxiety so much because then like you're not stumbling over your words, you're not apologizing, you're not making it
Yes.
awkward for the client.
Yes, yeah. And that's one of the things in that little $9 course is I have scripts of how to tell clients that you're pregnant, even how to like disclose to clients who maybe have had struggle trying to conceive or they've
Hmm.
experienced pregnancy loss. Even at that point, like you were talking about your experience working in, pediatric hospice, that what you are going through being pregnant can be triggering for some clients. And so I've
Absolutely. Yeah.
offered to them at that point, if at any point in our work right now, before I go on maternity leave, you feel like this is just too hard and you want to be referred to somebody else, that is okay too. And so
Hmm.
there's scripts for disclosure, there's scripts for your emails, how to talk to them about what's coming at the end and even your return from maternity leave. So yes, I think the more you have like language for yourself,
Yes. Hmm.
the more you feel comfortable with it, the more comfortable the clients are going to feel, and it's going to just be received in a different way.
Right. Yeah, that's wonderful. And wow, that's a lot for $9. So we'll be
Yeah.
sure to drop in the show notes, probably provide you that. We'll drop the link
Yes.
in the show
Yeah.
notes for people who want to check that out.
Yeah. And it'll be in the show notes, and it's also just bit.ly/maternity leave blueprint. But yeah, it'll be in the show notes for people to check out. But yeah, it's one of these things, like, this is, again, one of the things that was never taught in grad school.
Hmm.
And we don't really think about it until we're in the midst of it. And
Hmm.
so this is hopefully a tool that, whether somebody is planning to have children in the future, or they're in the midst of pregnancy, or adoption or surrogacy, that this can help them think through, like, what would this look like for my practice? And, how can I use this to help strengthen my belief that, like, I deserve this. It is okay to do this, that I can, take this for myself and my family.
Yeah, yeah, wonderful. Okay. And do you cover that at all on your podcast? So Ashley also has a podcast,
Yes.
Raised to Empower.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, so I did a series this past year while I was going through my pregnancy, of what it looked like to be pregnant in the first trimester in private practice, and the second and the
oh,
third,
cool.
and
Yeah.
just and then, returning from maternity leave to practice. And so there was a whole series of that's on that show. And then I also did a series back in this summer of 23, and I don't have the exact podcast episode numbers to share, but looking at what maternity leave looks like for different types of families. So we had an episode that focused on single motherhood by choice, or journeying through maternity leave in private practice with pregnancy loss, or
Mhm.
adoption, and just struggle trying to conceive, and what that looked like, fertility treatments, because those are those are, journeys to parenthood that have their own unique challenges that can then pose
Mhm.
unique challenges in bringing in practice. And so I interviewed several different colleagues who were kind of all in different places in their journey to motherhood, and have experienced a variety of different challenges. And just, what did it look like taking maternity leave as an adoptive parent, or going through fertility treatments, and how did you
Yeah.
talk about that with clients, and so forth. So that's all, in episodes on that show as well. But yeah, so that was a fun series that, is there. And I do talk about just the challenges with motherhood and
Yeah.
pregnancy and all
Right.
of that on the show as well, in private practice.
Okay, yes. And we are a female dominated field, but there might be male clinicians listening to
Yeah.
this that are thinking about paternity leave.
Yep.
It sounds like a lot of the things we've discussed today would be applicable to them, except that they're talking
Absolutely.
about their partner or however this child is coming into their
Yeah.
lives and still needing the scripts and still needing a plan and all of those
Yes.
things. So it sounds like the podcast, as well as that $9 offer, would be something that would benefit men as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes. You may not be carrying the child, but you are still becoming a parent. And so, whatever that looks like for you and your partner, you know, there are absolutely applicable pieces of this for you if you are in private practice.
Sure. Yes. Yes. And to be all inclusive, it also could be a female partner that is not
Absolutely.
bearing the child. So, whatever
Absolutely.
way a family is forming,
Yeah.
I think this information is applicable across the
Absolutely.
board. It's about being informed, it's about being prepared,
Yep.
and, planning for as much as you can, knowing that
Yes.
that may change.
Yeah. Well, and if anything, like, what I want people to be able to walk away from is feeling, I mean, my podcast is called the Raised to Empower podcast, because I want people to feel empowered, that I'm not, again, making a decision out of fear or out of, like, permission asking, but, like, I'm making this decision to take maternity leave from a place of, empowerment, from a place of control, a place of choice, that this is what I want to do and this is how I want it to look, not because somebody else is telling me what it's supposed to look like or how it's supposed to
Hmm.
go.
Yeah, yeah, that's great. Okay. Any other closing thoughts about maternity leave in private practice?
Don't let it be the thing that holds you back from going into private practice. If you are
Yes.
interested in private practice, but you're saying, well, I'm not sure if I should, leave agency work, because of maternity leave. If that is the sole thing that's holding you back from, starting private practice, there are absolutely ways for you to have maternity leave, feel like you have a better work-life balance if that's what you're interested in with private practice. So don't feel like you have to be stuck in, a kind of W-2, agency community work if that's not what you want to be doing and you want to have a family.
Yeah, wonderful. That's a great message. Okay. So, Ashley, please tell me if you have a favorite catchphrase or analogy you like to use with your client.
So, the analogy that I like to use with clients is about coping skills, because a lot of times clients will say, well, I tried the meditation before and it didn't work, or I've tried breathing, or I've tried, counting or box breathing or whatever the thing is. And I always tell them, like, when are we doing that, right? Is it when you're like on the verge of the panic attack? Because the analogy I use is it's like soccer, right? If you played a sport, if you are going into the championship final, you're not going to try this new skill for the very first time in that game. You're going to practice it and rehearse it in scrimmages, in other like lower stakes games. We're not going to do it in the big championship. And so it's the same thing. When we are feeling really anxious, we don't want to, for the first time, be like, well, now's the time I'm going to meditate. Now is the time I'm going to, do breathing or tapping. We want to practice that in the times when the stakes are low, when we're actually feeling a bit more relaxed, so we can kind of build that muscle memory. So that's the analogy that I usually use with the clients when we're talking about, trying to use those tools that we're always talking about in therapy to implement in our day-to-day life.
Right. Yes. Yes. That can be a common frustration for therapists.
Yes.
Having clients actually use the skills that we teach them. But I
Yes.
also am familiar with a lot of therapists, including myself, that have all kinds of suggestions for clients that we don't do for ourselves. So
yes,
we have to
100%,
keep that in mind.
100%. Yes, yes.
Yeah.
But yeah, I always tell them, like, we don't want to do it in the big game. We want to do it in those small moments, when the stakes aren't as high.
Yeah, absolutely. Ashley, I really appreciate you coming and hanging out with me. This was a lot of
Yeah.
fun. For those of you listening, please remember our work is hard, but it doesn't have to be lonely. Thank you so much for listening to the Colleague Down the Hall podcast. For show notes, links, and downloads, head over to colleaguedownthehall.com, where you'll be able to learn more about getting the clinical support you need and resources to help you work in a supported, sustainable way. If you've enjoyed this episode, please share with your therapy friends and colleagues. Subscribe to the podcast, and if you love this episode, please leave a review.